Hello, I'm Robin Vincent and welcome to Multi-Music Technology. Today we're looking at the Microsoft Surface Pro 8. Now the Surface Pro 8 is the latest in a long line of Surface products from Microsoft, of which I've been dabbling and messing about and making music and performing live with ever since the Surface Pro 3. You'll find all of my adventures over on the surfaceproaudio.com website. And if you're a little bit confused about multi-music technology and Surface Pro Audio, don't be. They're all the same thing. Everything I do comes under multi-music technology, and you will find all of my Surface videos which are displayed on surfaceproaudio.com. All of them will be on the multi-music technology channel. It's the channel on which I do everything, which includes MIDI controllers, audio interfaces, Eurorack synthesizers, all sorts of music technology stuff interleaved with stuff on the Surface. So you will find all of it there. So the purpose of this video is to kick off my investigation into the Surface Pro 8 to see how suitable and decent and interesting and fascinating it is for music production, whether that's live performance, playing software synthesizers, recording bands and audio, processing sound, and creating your latest masterpiece. Is it any good? Can it do that? Those are the questions. And within those sorts of questions, we'll also look at how to best get it running, how to get over or work around any of the problems that might come up. And the first question probably is, why do this? Why use a Surface? Why don't I use a Mac like everybody else? Well, that's one of those questions. I mean, the Surface Pro is never intended to be a replacement or an alternative to a MacBook Pro. It's just not. The same as it's not an alternative to a whopping great big desktop size laptop. It is none of those things. What the Surface Pro is, and what has always intrigued me about it and brought me into this place of fiddling about with it, is that it has a very creative interface. The touchscreen element, the pen element, and along with that, most importantly, is that it runs desktop software. So you could see it has taken all the creativity and the engagement that we get from the iPad, but with all of the software compatibility and plugins and instruments and general usage that you get from a proper computer, because it's running Windows, regular Windows, not some cut down version of some kind of mobile OS. No, this is the real deal. So you can run Pro Tools, Cubase, Ableton Live, Bitwig, you can run Omnisphere, you can run Serum, you can run huge synthesizers and orchestral instruments, or at least we think we can, because I haven't really tested it out yet, and that's what we're here to do. So for me, the Surface Pro is a fascinatingly creative and potentially awesome little music making station. It's not going to replace your desktop. This is for something else. This is for mid-level projects. This is for smaller stuff. This is for live performance, when you can just click and tab off clips and stuff and get your fingers involved in moving things around without having to drop to the tiny trackpad or mouse type situation. It's a launch pad, it's a clip launcher, it's a sampler, multi-recorder effects processor, it's a modulator for your modular, and it's a synthesizer and orchestra and band, all within this little form. So let's talk about the physicality of the Surface Pro 8, because it is different. If I reach over here for my Surface Pro 7, you might be able to see a little bit of different. Now this is the one that I've been using up until now, and this very much follows the same form factor as it's always had, with the rather nice removable keyboard, the pen that clips on the side. It has a couple of ports on the side, one regular USB and one USB-C. Previous to that, it had one USB and one display port, so at least has come on in that direction. But the Surface Pro 8 is somewhat different. The first thing you may notice is actually the screen has much thinner bezels at the sides. You're getting more screen space. Take this off here a second. The buttons are not on the top. The buttons are at the side, like so. The keyboard is different. It follows the same idea, but within here we find the pen, a kind of a weirdly flat pen which charges within this port, which is quite neat and interesting, but it's different. This is slightly different, and what we find the closer we look at it is that we discover that it's actually based upon the Surface Pro X form factor. Surface Pro X was a kind of a weird experimental surface that they released, was it last year possibly, that runs on an ARM processor. So it was the ARM version of Windows, which meant it can only run a certain number of apps and certain type of things from the Windows Store. Now with the Surface Pro 8 they've taken that form factor, so the thinner bezels, the slightly rounded edges, the use of keyboard and the pen held within the keyboard, they've taken all of that from the Surface Pro X but put it into a proper 64-bit Windows solution. Let's take these two things apart so we can just look at the tablet itself. So here we go. Same idea. Now the specifications that I've gone for this time around are the i5 16GB. Now historically every single Surface I've had, I've always gone for the i5 8GB. The reason for that was that it was a couple of reasons. It's kind of the middle choice. It wasn't the entry level, it wasn't the whacking great big posh one. It was somewhere in the middle, which is more reasonably priced and yet still offers a lot of performance. The other thing is that I rarely go for the i7 on the Surface. The reason being is that the i7 processor tends to run hot, and that either means that they have to build fans in, or it means that it's always trying to clock down in order to cool itself. With the i5 processor it's less likely to do that, and you're more likely to get a stable processor speed and therefore less glitchy audio. Seems counterintuitive somehow to get a lower powered processor in order to be able to do more. But that is actually how it works out. So I always will continue to recommend the i5 as the best processor for this platform. Now this time around I've gone for 16 gigs of RAM, mainly because the i5 8GB is now kind of the entry level version. I thought, well, I better do at least one up from the entry level. So this has 16GB of memory in it. Will that make a difference? I don't know. That's not for this video. I will be doing another video after this one which will go into intense performance testing. What we're looking at doing in this video is just seeing how it runs more or less out of the box. What's the potential? Is it going to throw us up a load of problems, or is it just going to kind of work? That's what we're about in this video. So what else do we get? Well, as I say, the buttons are now on the side rather than the top. The top is completely smooth. So you've got volume control over here along with the headphone socket, and you've got the power button on the other side. This presents a problem, which you may see during the course of this video, simply that when I want to plug in my headphones, like I've got here, you tend to push on the other side of the device. I can't find it. Where is it? It's slightly weirdly in the middle. There we go. You tend to push on the other side of the device in order to plug it in. Yeah, you do. It's a natural thing to do. Now the problem with that is that the power button is also right here, and I have many times already, just been playing this a little bit, gone like that and turned the unit off by plugging in the headphones. It's extremely annoying, frustrating, but it's a tiny thing and all you have to do is not do it. The other thing we have on the side is two new ports. Now these are USB-C / Thunderbolt ports. That's very interesting. Could get very, very interesting. Why is that interesting, I hear you say? Well, because there are a range of Thunderbolt audio interfaces which are particularly good, and I do have one, and it could mean that we could plug one of those into here and have it work, which would be awesome. Now Thunderbolt and USB-C is very confusing and annoying because the gods of technology decided that USB-C and Thunderbolt would share the same port, the same physical port, that USB-C size port, which sounds like a great idea, except that not all USB-C ports support Thunderbolt, and it's not always very clear when that occurs. So you get a device with USB-C, you go, oh, it looks like Thunderbolt, plug that in, no, it doesn't work. Ugh, because the technology behind that port has to be Thunderbolt enabled. So it's just created a bit of confusion. But hopefully I'll be able to show and demonstrate what can work with this and what perhaps doesn't. But the fact that there are two ports for that gives me hope, because the 2 ports in the Surface Pro 7 were incredibly useful, 2 USB ports, because it meant you could plug in a MIDI keyboard and something like an audio interface that I have there. Being able to plug those 2 things in without having to use a hub is awesome, and we couldn't do that on previous versions of the Surface Pro. So that's a real step up. So I'm quite excited to find out what happens when we start plugging things into these ports at the side here. Now, I haven't done that yet. I haven't plugged any peripherals in, so I don't actually know, and I hope during the course of this video to plug some stuff in and find out whether it works. But back to the hardware for the moment, so I haven't quite finished because the keyboard is slightly different. As you can see, the keyboard has this slot for the pen. I'll bring this out again, which is, see how it's really strangely thin and stuff. I mean, the pen is excellent. We'll look at that in a moment. But it does make the keyboard slightly chunkier than the Surface Pro 7 and the ones that came before it. So although this action is very similar, it is slightly different. Is it good or bad? Don't know. But it does sit a little bit high on the screen where you might want to be pressing different bits. If we have a look at the other one, do you see how this doesn't sit quite so high? Well, we're talking millimeters, but you know, it's just a consideration. It also means that the keyboard is not compatible with the previous generation. It has different ports. With the Surface Pro 7, you see you've got this port here, whereas the Surface Pro 8, it has different ways of connecting, so they're not interchangeable. So we're moving on to another generation, a new way of doing things with the Surface Pro 8. Otherwise, it's available in a couple of different finishes. This is the black, I think, obviously, is it? Don't know. Feels really nice. The screen is absolutely gorgeous. And it does have this grill here for cooling purposes, but I haven't really felt it get terribly hot yet, but then I haven't been really pushing it. The other cool feature is that the SSD drive is accessible here. You can actually swap it out for a larger one. This model comes with 256 gigabytes of SSD drive, so I could potentially put something bigger in there. On the Surface Pro 7, there used to be a micro SD card slot. I'm not entirely sure if there is on the Surface Pro 8. I haven't found one yet, is all I can say. It might be in there. But in the place where the other one was, is where we find the opening for the SD card. I mean, perhaps there's something under there. I haven't investigated that. Maybe you can tell me in the comments if you find out. Now, I should note and remind you and myself that I'm looking at this from the position and the point of view of music production. Yeah, I'm not looking at it from a point of gaming. I don't care about that. I don't care about browsing the internet. I don't care about anything other than, can it run audio software? Can I play synthesizers at a low latency? And does it sound any good? That is my focus. And so, of course, we find that it has Windows 11 on it. And the first question is going to be, well, is Windows 11 any good for audio? Oh my goodness, what's it going to mean for all of my stuff? Well, that's a good question. So I think from this point, I'm going to bring you in. We're going to look a little bit closer. We're going to have a little tiny look at Windows 11, and then we're going to get stuck into our first experience of running music software and installing things like a MIDI keyboard and an audio interface. That's going to be fun. So Windows 11. Do we care about Windows 11? Are we annoyed that they produced Windows 11 after saying that they'd never go any further than Windows 10? No, we don't care about any of that kind of thing. What I've come to understand after being involved in Windows for like 30 years of my life is that I no longer care. I don't really care about the operating system. All I care about is, can I run the software that I want to run? Because I don't spend any time particularly looking at the operating system. I spend all my time in the software that I want to use. And I found really that the best OSs are the ones that just don't get in the way. They don't put barriers up. I mean, there was a massive change, probably with Windows 8, that really revolutionized the way Windows worked. Now, I know everybody hated the big tile thing that happened, but there was stuff behind the scenes going on with the file management and with the way that you launched programs that was really revolutionary and has carried on through Windows 8.1, which tidied it all up, into Windows 10 and now Windows 11. And that is really the simple access to the bits that you need. If I want to run a piece of software, I just press on it or click on it from the taskbar and it runs. It really is that simple. I don't want anything more difficult than that. I don't want to have to be searching for things or finding things in a list. I just want to run it. I've come to the place now that I don't want anything really on my desktop. I don't want loads of icons and stuff there. I just want to be able to run it with a single push or a single click. And that's what Windows has enabled me to do ever since version 8. With Windows 11, there's been some cosmetic changes, but I don't know, again, that I care that much. The fact that everything's now in the middle here doesn't really matter, and also I can change it to the left if I prefer. There's an option to do that. The start menu here, these pinned icons at the top are, I don't know, completely arbitrary, something that Microsoft want you to look at. Again, I don't care about them. If there's something which is not on my taskbar that I want, I just type and it appears. If there's anything that I've just installed, it will be right here. If I want to see everything, I just press on All Apps, and there's my list like we've had since Windows XP. It's all fine. So ultimately, Windows 11 doesn't get in the way. There's a couple of things I like. I like the improvements to what's going on over here. The ability to change wireless networks is very easy. Access to the screen contrast and volume and bits and pieces is very easy and so much nicer than it has been previously. Things like the file manager are more or less just the same as they've always been. Something weird happens when you pick stuff up and move it around, is that you get this kind of magic glass that appears around the window that you don't get when you use the trackpad or a mouse. Don't know what that's about. But I don't know that I care. Another interesting feature is that when you go to the maximize button, you now get a few options that come up. So I could stick it over there, for instance, or in different places. It doesn't seem to work quite so well with touch, which is interesting. But if you hover a mouse, I can stick it over there. Is that cool? I don't know. Maybe it is. It's a great way of arranging different windows, but this is probably not the screen on which you would do that. You'd do that on a much larger screen. Elements like the widgets. I don't really care, again, about widgets. It's of very little use to me when I'm trying to make music. I mean, I use a Surface Pro 6 as my sort of everyday in the house computer, and I do work on it, and I write on it, and I surf, and I watch, and I can do everything on it. And it's a fantastic little laptop type computer for doing all those sorts of things. And my use of keyboard, trackpad, and touch is completely natural, organic, and integrated. And for that kind of purpose, the Surface is a great platform. I love the fact that it folds down really small. I love the fact that I can take the keyboard off and have it sat on my knee to watch a movie, or I can flip it over the back and set it up in different ways. You know, there's lots of really good things about the Surface as a general laptop platform. But for music production, I don't care about that. I don't care about this being on glass. I don't care about putting different windows in different places. I just want to get access to my music software, and I want it to be able to work without glitching. That is the key. Now, assuming that this is going to work okay with software and bits and pieces that I'm going to plug in a minute, then I'm not really going to look at any of the deeper settings, any of the power settings or system settings, or any of those tweaks that we would normally do to a computer designed for audio. I will get to all of that. I'll do that in the video that I do on performance testing, because that's when it's going to be important. Hopefully, we're just going to be able to see things running right now. So that's the next thing to get to. Now, I've spent a lot of time installing software onto this machine, but I haven't put any hardware on. But I already have Studio One, Reason, Ableton Live and Bitwig Studio on here, plus a bunch of different synthesizers and instruments. So those are what we're going to use just to test out this system. Now there's one thing that I will do first, which is I'm going to run the LatencyMon app, which should give us a general idea as to whether this system is capable of running real-time audio or not. Now, LatencyMon from resplendence.com will just analyze the system and will look out for things which could cause glitching in real-time audio. Things like interrupts to the processor, certain drivers which are behaving badly, that kind of thing. All you do is hit the green button and see what happens. Now it's worth running it for a few minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, something like that, just to give it the opportunity to really crunch in to what the system is about. But what I can happily say at this point is that everything is in the green, and that's awesome. That means the likelihood is that we'll be able to run audio software and it's not just going to click and pop like an idiot because of some poor driver that's in there. It should pretty much work. So that's a really good start. And I should stress that I haven't done any tweaking on this system at all. I haven't changed any of the power settings or the display settings or any of the other bits and pieces that we might do within Windows. This is just out of the box. How is it going to run? Well, let's get stuck in. Let's start with Ableton Live. So I'm going to bring up the demo song. And before we start, let's have a look at the audio settings, because Ableton Live has quite an antiquated driver support system when it comes to Windows. It only supports either ASIO drivers, which you get with proper audio interfaces, which we may look at in a bit. But as far as Windows goes, it only really supports MME and DirectX, which is very, very old school. But let's go and have a look. So MME and DirectX, it gives us an input choice and an output choice. Currently the output is set to speakers, high definition audio SST DX. So let's go with that. Now, not bad. We're using the onboard speakers. Now, I'm finding the onboard speakers to be pretty meaty, certainly compared to other surfaces. So, not bad, quite good, but this is not really what we want. What we want is we want to be using the headphone output, at the very least. So, let's do that. So, it's just got a mini jack port out the side here. So what I've done is I've got a mini jack cable which is plugged in to my main system so that we can hear it properly. And of course I've just turned the computer off by pressing that in. Now if we hit play, it's still coming out of the speakers. That's because Ableton Live isn't clever enough to identify the fact that we've now got the headphones plugged in. So we have to go to Options, Preferences, select the output to be... Oh, it doesn't give us a choice for the headphones. Oh, that's probably because I'm going to need to restart Ableton in order to make that happen. That's what I think. Because when you're using Windows drivers, it's not always the best platform for audio software. So if we go to the audio output here and check what this is about, it's now on headphones here. So if we go back to Ableton Live, see what that's going to do, that should now pick up the headphone driver which is loaded. The reason for this is because the Surface Pro always has had two audio drivers, and it annoys the heck out of me. Now the reason being is that listening on speakers and listening on headphones are two different experiences, and so Microsoft have tailored two drivers that work slightly differently and give you a better experience on each. Now when you plug in the headphone socket, normal Windows software goes, oh right, yeah, it's headphones, no problem, and switches to it. Pro audio software doesn't do that. It relies on you specifying exactly what inputs and outputs that you want. And so it can get a little bit messy and confused when dealing with this headphone output and the onboard speakers. All of that kind of rigmarole is resolved by using a proper audio interface, which we'll get to in a minute. But we will persevere with what we're doing. Okay, so now if we go to the preferences, we now have more choices within our outputs. We've now got a headphone output as well. There is, both you get a DirectX driver and also an MME driver. The MME driver is a really old one, which has got stacks of latency. So we're generally going to go for the DX, the DirectX one. So we want headphones selected there. That driver only appears when the headphones are plugged in. That's all part of the difficulty you have in navigating these sorts of systems with Pro Audio software and using the onboard stuff. Now it's coming out of here and going through my system properly. Now, as far as I can tell, that sounds alright. I can't hear any glitch. I mean, there's plenty of glitch within the track being used as a creative device, but there's no actual CPU dropouts or audio glitching that shouldn't be there. At least as far as I can tell so far. If we go to the mixer, there's one further tip to show you, which is that when you try to move faders and knobs within Ableton Live, it throws itself from maximum to minimum really quick without you really doing anything. Can you see that? The same as if I try to use the panning, it's very hard to get an in-between value. Yeah? Same is true if you use the pen. It just rockets from one side to the other. Now, within the options, what you need is to go down to look and feel, and then you've got a pen tablet mode. You want to turn that on. And now it's much more relative to the position of the pen or your finger, and that now works properly. So there's a tip. Good. Let's go on to another piece of software. Let's try Reason from Propellerhead. Let's open up a demo song. See how that goes. Yeah, again, that seems to be working fine. The touch response on Reason is alright. It's not fantastic. You can't control more than one thing at a time, so it doesn't have multi-touch support or anything similar to Ableton Live, but at least they do work without you having to do anything new or extra. Navigating the rack is really easy when you go for over here to move about with. If you try to move about within here, you just end up picking up stuff and literally moving and dragging it about. But if you use the little explorer over here, then it works really, really well. If you start with something new, let's bring in the Kong. Just to have a quick look at the latency. I don't know whether you can see that. But there's a certain amount of delay in hitting a pad and hearing a sound. That's to do with the latency built into the Windows audio system. Which is something we're going to have to look at. Studio One. Okay, let's open up a demo song. Now, one of the nice things about Studio One is that it is multi-touch. So you can do sort of proper mixing and manipulation and stuff like that directly onto the console and mixer and editing and other bits and pieces. It's very, very friendly to touch. But again, crystal clear playback, no difficulties as far as I can see or understand or grasp. And so far the Surface Pro 8 is behaving really, really nicely. Let's have a look at Bitwig Studio. Now Bitwig is very touch friendly. It's going to enable us to have a bit of an on-screen keyboard to play some of the sounds so that we can just look at that latency a little bit more. So let's just bring over a simple polysynth. Sad trombone. That is not too bad. That's not too bad at all. Why don't we try something a bit more percussive to see whether that gives us a clue as to how good the latency is, because at the moment that wasn't feeling too bad. Alright, so it's a bit laggy. It's lagging behind at the moment. Let's just have a quick poke in the audio engine just to see what we're doing in here. So we're using Wasapi, which is the fastest form of recent Windows drivers. We're using the headphone outputs we've got there, and the latency is set to 10 milliseconds, and that's kind of what I'm feeling. It feels just that little bit laggy. It's only really once you get under 10 milliseconds does latency start to feel playable. And when we're talking about latency, we're talking about the time it takes to hit a key and to hear that noise. It's the time it takes for the computer to process what you're wanting it to do to generate that audio and to pump it out of the outputs. You'll get that in every system, regardless of how powerful your processor is. And you get down to this sort of level, this 10 millisecond level with standard Windows drivers. To get beyond that, you need a proper audio interface with ASIO drivers, which is what we're going to look at in a minute. Now, could I potentially bring this down further? I could give it a go. Now that's not bad. That doesn't feel bad at all. This is the best I've felt something like a Surface feel with its own Wasapi drivers. This is really good news. This means that the audio system on this has been worked on, been massaged a bit. Let's see if I can push it any further. I take it down to 128 samples. Excellent. Excellent indeed. Okay, we're going to come out of this We'll plug in a MIDI keyboard in a minute, and then that'll give us a little bit more of what's going on. Let's have a look for some of the Arturia synths. I've got a couple in here that I've installed. Let's have a look at the stage piano. Let's see if this gives us a similar playable experience. Well, at the moment it's currently set to the speaker output, so we're going to have to sort that out to start with. And let's resize ourselves up to a bit more. So Windows Audio, speakers, we want it on headphones. It's on 256 samples. Let's try to take it down to 128. So really what we need to do at this point is plug in a MIDI keyboard so I can do this a bit more properly. This is all just sort of fussing around with it. But I have to say at this point, this is really impressive. The latency just using the headphone output is great. There's no glitching, there's no skipping or audio dropouts going on, and it's feeling pretty responsive. So the first big test then is putting in a MIDI keyboard so that we can see whether that's going to allow us to play over USB into here and get a good sound. So let's do that. So I'm going to be plugging in an Arturia Keystep 37 that I've got here because I happen to have it to hand. Okay, so the first problem we're going to hit is how on earth do we plug in a regular USB cable into the side of here with its USB-C ports? Well, we use an adapter. Like so. It's not very exciting. That's it. USB goes in there. And then this gives us the USB-C connection which goes in the side. Now hopefully this will sit there nicely because I haven't done this yet. Let's turn it on. Now, I don't know what Windows 11 does when you install anything. Does it just work? Don't know. Let's see if I can find the device manager and see whether that's happened. So it should be under sound, video and game controllers, Arturia Keystep 37. There you go. That was spookily easy. So if we bring back up our piano, we've now got Windows settings here. Let's go down to 128. Let's go for Arturia Keystep, turn that on. Let's make this is the piano now, let's make this a bit bigger so we can see what's going on. Would like to take a quick tour? No, we wouldn't. Would we like to play our instrument? Yes, we would. Thank you very much. Now that doesn't feel too bad. It doesn't feel perfect. It's still a little bit of lag. Let's go and have another look. Can I take it down any further? No, that's as far as it's going to go. Right, let's try the Mark 78, whatever it's called. Let's try the Arturia, the Stage 73. There we go, that's what I'm talking about. So we're going to have to go into this and turn on the MIDI. Well, as I say, with the piano as well, it's really close. It's nearly there. Maybe it is there. I think perhaps I need to go back to some drums in order to try that out. So let's go back into Bitwig, because that was doing a good job, we thought. It's good. It's good. I wasn't expecting it to be this good. Really, really wasn't. Let's try a drum kit from Contact. Something a little bit different if I've got one in there somewhere. Very interesting. Yeah, totally playable. Totally playable. Very interesting. Let's go into Studio One. I'm just trying to use as many different pieces of software as possible in order to give you the best, roundup of what's possible. So let's try a new song. Yep, whatever. Let's just check the audio options. So Windows Audio, output latency is 40 milliseconds. That's not great. That's not really what we want. So can we bring that down? Woo! Enormous spider. Thank you, Enormous Spider. Yeah, all right. Thank you. Headphones, yep. Okay, it's going to let us go down to 10 milliseconds. That's as far as it will go. Fair enough. Let's see what we've got. Let's put in Wave Razor. Yeah, once again we're finding a little bit of latency from the 10 milliseconds, which is not quite the same as what we were finding elsewhere, with things that could go less than that. So yeah, there's a bit too much drag in Studio One because it's not letting us go down any further than those 256 samples. Interesting. Ableton Live will probably be the same. Let's try that out. So let's pick up something from Cherry Audio. Yeah, there's definite lag going on there. Let's see if we have any options at all. I don't believe we do. Output configuration, no, we can just turn them on or off. latency, output buffer size. Right, let's see if we can take that down. Okay, 256. Let's give that a go. So as you can hear, it's all crackly and gone horrible. That's because the driver architecture with Ableton Live isn't able to cope with that smaller buffer size. It needs a larger buffer in order to process the audio and get that out successfully. Let's bring that back up a little bit to, I don't know, 512. Will let me do 512? Yep. No, again, this is because it's purely down to the drivers that Ableton Live supports. It's nothing to do with Windows or the Surface Pro 8. It's just to do with how Ableton doesn't support Wasapi drivers, and so it needs a big chunk of latency to cope. There we go. So yeah, I mean, it's not terrible, but at the same time it's not awesome. It's not like what we were finding in Bitwig or in individual synthesizers. This is more to do with Studio One kind of level of latency. But again, this is with the onboard sound. I haven't even installed anything clever like ASIO for all. I'm just using Wasapi drivers, and we've had some really good responses to that. So then, in summary at this point, pieces of software which support proper Wasapi Windows drivers, which is the most recent architecture within Windows, seem to be able to get down to playable latencies, which is awesome. Just coming out of here without having to install anything like the ASIO for All hack, which I may look at another time. So in order to step forward another bit, I need to install an audio interface and see if that makes, first of all, see that will work, because then you've got audio that's being transported over the USB interface here, over the USB port. Does that work nicely? And is it easy to do? And is it going to improve our situation? So to attempt to do this, I'm going to use Focusrite Claret here. Now this is a Thunderbolt interface, the 2 Pre, and all being well, this should work because it's supposed to be Thunderbolt compatible there. Now this is a slightly older Thunderbolt port, so I've got a riot of cables and adapters in order to make it happen. First of all, I've got this, I think it's an Apple adapter, which goes from USB-C to Thunderbolt at the other end, or it might be DisplayPort. Oh, I don't know. See, it gets really confusing. Nobody really knows. So I'm going to plug that in the side and see what happens. So I'm going to download the drivers from the Focusrite website. Okay, let's give it a go. Plug it into my unwieldy adapter. This is what Apple people have to deal with all the time. Ooh! Found it. Let's update it. I mean, obviously the solution for this kind of rigmarole over here is to get the cable that fits your device. So rather than having to deal with adapters, you get a cable that goes from Thunderbolt 2 to Thunderbolt 4, which is what's in the side here, or goes from USB-A to USB-C. That would be a better solution than messing around with these, but this will do for now. Look at that. Look at that. So on our device here, you can see that we've got lights. We've got green lights on. One saying that the Thunderbolt's attached. One saying that it's got sync and it's locked and it's powered. It's all looking really good. Right, let's open up the piano. Go back to our audio MIDI settings. This time go for ASIO. Thunderbolt Focusrite ASIO, outputs 1 and 2. latency down to 4 milliseconds. Let's give it a go. Sounds all right to me. Oh yeah, that's the ticket. Yeah, brilliant. Let's try something else. This is Sound Paint. Yeah, feels really good. Feels fabulous. So back in the Studio One, where the latency was not that great, let's see how it does with the Focusrite. Oh, that's bang on now. So there you are, the Surface Pro 8. First impressions, core flip. That works really well. I've not had this easier time with my first play with the Surface Pro since the Surface Pro 3. I don't think. I remember, the first experience of plugging in the Surface Pro 3, it all just worked. And it all worked brilliantly, which was why it was so crushing to get to the Surface Pro 4 for it all to fall apart. But of course it was all recovered, and everything since that time has been kind of okay, but required quite a bit of tweaking to get it together. Surface Pro 8 is flipping out of the gate, just working. Working really well. I mean, first of all, I'm impressed by the Wasapi drivers. I'm impressed by the fact that the onboard sound, with the right piece of software, something like Bitwig and some of the Arturia synths, those that can bring the buffer size down, which I haven't really seen you been able to do before. You kind of get stuck at 480 samples, which is 10 milliseconds. That's always seemed to be the speed limit. But within Bitwig and some other of those synths, I was able to bring it down further, and it became playable. It wasn't awesome playable, but it was playable enough. I was able to knock out a couple of drums, which is very unusual for something which is not perfect, if you know what I mean. So that was very, very impressive. I'm impressed mightily by that. I haven't had to touch ASIO for All, which is a third-party application that kind of hacks in some ASIO drivers to bring the latency down. Haven't had to play with that. In fact, I'm not going to at this point. I'm just using the Wasapi drivers, and that was a real surprise. Really, really good. And at no point have I hit any glitches with dropouts or the CPU going, oh my goodness, or crackling or anything nefarious like that. Very interesting. Then I installed the Claret, the Focusrite, Thunderbolt in the side. Bang, it just worked. No mess, no fuss. It worked. Brought the latency down further, made everything super, super playable, and is going to give it a much higher quality of audio, both recording and playback. Fan-flipping-tastic, that is. And I didn't pre-rehearse any of this. So the installing the MIDI keyboard and installing the interface, that was done for real. First time of trying that out. And it's all just worked. Phenomenal. That's really great. I'm mightily impressed, I have to say. I'm really... I really didn't expect to be in this position. I expected at this point to be going, well, okay, give me some time and I'll look into the tweaks and bits and pieces and we'll see if we can recover some of the, I was expecting to make that kind of speech. And no, it's just working. It's just working. Hallelujah. Is it Windows 11? Is that part of it? Maybe. I don't know. Is it just the architecture of the Surface itself? Possibly. So those are interesting questions. Now, my next video on this will be performance testing, because what we haven't done is we haven't stressed the CPU enough to know whether it will maintain its ability to do real audio or whether it will crap out, clock down, and everything will just fall apart. That's the bit we don't know yet. But what I can say for certain is that you can throw on an instrument and you can play it. You can throw on a project and you can play it back. What happens longer term on more intense situations, or as the system heats up, all those sorts of changes is what I'm going to look at next in my next video. But for now, I can give the Surface Pro 8 my seal of approval at this point to say that out of the box, it's working really well. Really, really well. So that's great. And Windows 11 as well. I've absolutely have no problems with it. It's enjoyable, it's seamless, it looks nice, it feels nice, it glides about the place. I've got no worries. I can get to what I need to do, and some of the bits that have been tidied up are good. I'm impressed by that. So far, so good. Now, I appreciate this may have been a long video. Some people out there don't like long videos. If you've skipped to the conclusion, then well done. Well done, good. It's a shame that you miss out on the adventure, because I like the adventure. I like exploring things. I like to be able to answer or pre-answer the questions when people go, oh, does it work with Pro Tools? Well, that's one question I can't answer because I just can't be bothered with Pro Tools anymore. I can't be bothered with it. Can't be bothered with the subscription. Can't be bothered with the fuss that it takes to get it to work on a Windows platform. So just use something else. If you want to use Pro Tools, then try that out for yourself. But I will be trying and testing exhaustively on here Studio One, Reason, Ableton Live, Bitwig, also Cubase, which I haven't installed yet. I will get to that as well. Plus a whole raft of different software synths and sample-based synthesizers to see how well they run. I'll be sticking Doorbench on here. I'll be pushing it to its limits to see how far it will go. And that's going to make for a fun next video, I think. But I hope that my looking around and poking about has been useful. It gives you an overall flavour of what's possible and how well this thing has worked. That screen is absolutely lovely, I have to say. So, good stuff so far. Thank you, Microsoft. Oh, I should say that Microsoft have not sent this to me. This is not some kind of freebie. No, I've forked out for this myself, bought it myself, and they have absolutely no influence over what I get to say in these videos. All I'm trying to do is test it out so that you know whether it's a safe platform for running music stuff on. So far, it is. But wait for my performance video, which will be along in a week or two, where I really get down to the nuts and bolts of what this is all about. So yeah, I hope that was helpful. In the meantime, go and make some tunes.